John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Before we get into the episode, just want to let you know that this is the free version of the podcast, and all that means is that we are way behind where I'm at in Patreon. So if you are loving this podcast and you need more John Constantine in your life, definitely go check us out at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, where you'll get access to the entire Hellblazer library that I've recorded so far. And also you'll get access to the exclusive episodes of the Planes, Trains, and Comic Books main podcast. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely go over to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, and sign up there. And with that out of the way, let's get into the issue. Today we're reading Hellblazer number 51, and just a little recap on what happened in the last one. The last one was kind of a setup issue for what's going to go on in the future. We saw that John and Kit are in a budding relationship. They are like sleeping together now. And then we also saw some fallout from John messing with the three kings of hell and deceiving them and being able to be cured. The king of vampires shows up, and John had to talk to him because now he is thinking John is like the best magical person in the world or something. So he wanted John to help him out. And he offered John a position to be what essentially would be his familiar. Like he would work for the king of vampires, and then eventually John would be able to get turned into a vampire. But John did not like that deal, so he rejected it, and the king of vampires went away very angrily, and he was saying, "I'll get you, John Constantine, if it's the last thing I do." Well, not exactly that, but you get the point. So first things first, with Hellblazer 151, we start with the cover here, and we see John is kind of standing in the middle of a bunch of repeating pictures of washing machines. And he's, of course, in his usual pose with his trench coat lapels up, and he's smoking, and he's looking at us like, what do you want? And we also see on the cover that this is written by John Smith with art by Sean Phillips. So this is going to be a filler issue in between Garth Ennis's run because John Smith is a fill-in writer, I guess. But we have seen the artist Sean Phillips before on this book. He did the couple of issues in the 30s around the Dead Boy's Heart issue. So he's back on for this fill-in issue, so that's kind of cool. So we start off on the first page, and John is, just like the cover suggested, in a laundromat. And his narration says, "So there I was, carton of fresh milk, spoon poised over me 3 shredded wheat, and what happens? Jerry Bloody Monaghan comes flying through me living room window like one of the professionals. Old school friends. I'll tell you, they're nothing but grief. He's a reporter now, apparently. Works for some half-arsed outfit called The Naked Truth, exposing the dark underside of contemporary Britain and all that. Seems he was doing the rounds at some of the more unusual spiritualist churches, and something took a fancy to him. Christ knows why. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't have it. Just kept walking around the room, grinding his teeth, and drooling all over me newspaper. 'Jerry,' I said to him, 'I don't know what's gotten into you, mate, but it's a definite improvement. I'm a bit rusty on ritual exorcism. Had to consult some of me old student manuals in the end. It took 3 hours of pushing and pulling to get the bastard out. And what did old Jerry do? Only bloody shat himself, didn't he? I just hope this stuff gets the stains out, because there's no way I'm washing them by hand.'" So over this inner narration, we see that John is, putting clothes in a washer. He's putting soap in. He's putting quarters in. And this is like a public laundromat, not one from his apartment. We see that the name of this issue is called Counting to 10. So in this public laundromat, there are 3 old ladies. There's a woman breastfeeding a baby. There's a teenager who's always on the phone. There's another old woman who's doing a crossword puzzle. And then there's 2 kids playing on the ground with some dolls. And as John looks around, he kind of notes that the kid on the phone is arguing with someone about a girl who's talking about him to other people. And then the mother who's breastfeeding is having a hard time to get the baby to latch. So John goes to sit down and wait for his clothes to be done. And his narration says, "I wonder what Jerry's up to now. He's probably pissed off with the silver by the time I get back. Probably." And then we get a quick inset panel of a hand that looks like it's on the floor, and there's some kind of symbol or shape that is underneath his hand written on the ground. Like I said, that's just like a pop-in panel. So the rest of the panels, we're seeing John getting comfortable, and his narration continues. Ah, sod it. He's an old friend. I should count myself lucky. There aren't many of them left these days. Girlfriends, the odd boyfriend, they all have a nasty habit of walking out on me. A couple of weeks and they've had enough. The mystique gets shabby, the jokes turn into digs, the sex goes stale, and your lovable man of mystery turns into the bloke next door. I'm hopeless when it comes to finishing relationships. Always have been. They usually end in a showdown or a bedroom scene or an argument in the back of a taxi. And then they throw up their arms or give me the V and bugger off without so much as a by your leave. That's the trouble with people these days. No commitment. So as John is thinking about all this, he's got a paper in his hands, but he's not really reading it. And he is like staring out into the middle distance, looking at the laundromat. So it's obvious he's thinking. And all of a sudden his thoughts are interrupted by an old lady saying, "Penny for him, love?" And John gets kind of snapped out of his thoughts and he says, "What?" And the old lady says, "For your thoughts. A penny for your thoughts. You look like the cat that got the cream." And John kind of smirks at her and says, "Not me, love. Not by a long chalk." So it turns out that the old woman who's talking to him is one of the 3 older women that John saw before, and they're all sitting together, so now they're kind of focused on John, and they begin to talk to him. So the one in the middle, who is not the one that was talking to him originally, says, "We haven't seen you in here before, have we, Phyllis?" And John answers her saying, "Nah, I leave my stuff for a service wash normally. I'm not very domesticated. Just wanted to get out tonight, change of scenery, you know?" And the same woman says, "Columbo." And John doesn't know what that means. He says, "Come again?" And the lady says, "That's who he reminds me of, Phyllis. You know Columbo, the one with the long coat." And then Phyllis, who was the original old lady that talked to John about Penny for Your Thoughts, says, "He's nothing like Columbo. Columbo had a squint." So all the ladies bicker back and forth about how he does or doesn't look like Columbo, and how they miss good shows like Columbo because now it's all Starsky and Hutch. And John kind of laughs at this and he asks, "So what are you ladies doing here then? Washing your smalls, are you?" And Phyllis says, "Oh, we come here every night. We're always here by 10. We must look like permanent fixtures by now." And then the second old lady cuts in and says, "Joan used to work here a few years back, didn't you, Joan? It was a fruit and veg shop then. There's usually only 4 of us, but Florrie, well, I'm not sure I should." And then Joan, the third woman of the group, looks up and says, "Florrie's dead." Then Phyllis kind of fills John in about Florrie, and she says, "She broke her leg just before last Christmas, outside Tedesco's. She's not been herself since. Her son Clive, that's her eldest, he got her to move in with him, but I don't think she really took to it. He lives in the high-rise flats off Old Kent Road. I told him, I said, she already lost her independence. The last thing you want to do is move her in a place like that. But he wouldn't listen, and she jumped off the balcony, 12 floors up." Then we get a cut-in panel again of a different scene, and this is the scene of the building 12 floors up, and we see an old lady's slipper kind of hovering down through the air. Then the second old woman, who we don't know her name yet, says, "She'll be here, though. She always is. We're always here by 10 o'clock. In fact, Florrie's usually the first one here." And as they were talking before, explaining what happened to Florrie, Joan got up and she was walking towards the front door as the others were explaining to John, and she started to look out the window, kind of waiting for Florrie. So now she's opened the door, just looking outside, and she says, "There's no sign of her." But Phyllis says, "Don't forget her leg. It's bound to slow you down a bit, isn't it? Breaking your leg like that." And with that explanation, the women get excited, and one of them says, "That's it. That's what it'll be. It'll be her leg." And John looks at the ecstatic older woman and says, "Yeah, you can't go far without him, can you?" And then he stares into her eyes, and his narration says, "She believes every word of it. She really thinks her friend is going to shuffle her way up here from the local bloody mortuary. Poor cow. It's come to something when the highlight of your day is a trip to the sodding laundrette. I think I'd rather top myself first. Not that that'd do any good." Then John looks around and he notices the kid is still on the phone, and the kid is saying, "I picked up the stuff before it went off and took it around to Bobby's. You should have seen the kids. Thought Christmas had come early, they did." And then John just kind of leans back against the wall and takes another drag of a cigarette, and he's still noticing that Joan is still waiting at the door, and he thinks to himself, 10 o'clock. That's what she said. We're always here by 10 o'clock. We see there is a clock on the wall, and it looks like it's saying it's 9:35, so it's almost 10 o'clock. And I think because the old women are kind of so believing it, John is watching the time more closely as it gets closer to 10. But then he kind of thinks about it and shakes it off, and his narration says, Jesus, I think I'm going around the twist. For a second there, I almost had myself believing him. This bloody place must be getting to me. It's so real, it's unreal. I'm starting to feel like I've walked onto a TV game show. I feel like a contestant on The Price is Right. And as John's thinking this, he's staring at the laundry machine, and he's just watching the clothes spin, kind of hypnotizing him. And then all of a sudden he hears someone say, abattoir. And he looks over and he sees another woman that we haven't met yet sitting next to him, and she's doing a word search while she's waiting for her clothes to be done. So John looks over at the word search that she's doing, and he notices that she's circling the word abattoir, and then all the other words that are circled are really messed up. One of them says sodomite, then there's one that says anal, and there's one that says molest. There's even one that says Satan. So obviously this is a different kind of word search than you normally would find. And upon seeing this, John all of a sudden gets a weird feeling that shoots through his body, and his narration says, for a moment, just for a moment, everything goes blurred. A wave of heat tightens around my throat, blood rockets to my head, and I get that familiar sensation, that old familiar sensation, that sick, sinking sensation in my chest, as if someone's let down a balloon inside me and all my guts are toppling inwards, collapsing inwards in slow motion. Then the shivers hit and I hug myself tight, trying to stop the jackrabbit that's twisting itself inside me, trying to muffle its kicks. A panic attack, that's all it was, a panic attack. So the panels below that narration do show John double over, and he drops his cigarette, and he is hugging himself pretty hard, and then he looks up in a cold sweat. He's trying to snap himself out of it, and he sees the woman who had the baby that was breastfeeding earlier, and they look like they're having fun. The baby's playing on her lap, and the narration continues. I mean, look around you. You're in a bloody laundromat, for Christ's sake. 10 minutes walk from home. You're turning into a flake. A grown man getting the heebie-jeebies over a word in a sodding puzzle book. You must be cracking up. And in the background, we've been hearing a phone ringing, and all of a sudden, John gets snapped out of his thoughts by the boy who was on the phone, tapping him on the folder and saying, it's for you, mate. And John looks up kind of confused and says, what? And the boy says, the phone. There's someone on the phone for you. So John looks at him and goes, oh, right. And then stands up and goes over to the phone, and it's almost like he's nervous about answering it, and he says, hello? And the person on the other line answers, butterflies pinned on a white girl's thigh. Atrocities come in threes. Fiends on the beach with metal detectors searching for fillings and Nazi treasure. There's a fetus crucified in the womb, nailed to the pelvis and spine. And oh, he's so hungry. He'll eat you out of house and home. And Jesus, why's your face so red? And John is just startled. He doesn't know what to say, so he says, what? Look, I don't know. And the voice continues, shut up and listen. There's a stable in the funny farm been emptied just for you. There's a doctor with some scissors and a saw. There are children on fire and they're calling you a liar. And an armless baby banging on the door. What are you doing here, Constantine? Who are you hiding from? It isn't Jerry, is it? Have you forgotten about... And then John hangs up the receiver before the man can finish. And we get a panel of John looking down like he's very sad or depressed or something. And the boy who normally was on the phone goes over and says, are you finished, mate? It's just that I'm expecting another call, you see, and then John just hands up the phone and walks away. And as he does, he walks through the children that were playing on the ground, and they have drawn some pictures that are on the floor, and John just steps on them. And the kids say, hey, watch where you're going. And we see that the picture is named Family Holiday at the top, but it is a picture of a car crash where there are people who are obviously mangled and dead, trapped in the wreckage of the car. And in the background, we hear the boy say, hello, Pete? No. Of course it wasn't. I mean, she was bleeding a bit, I'll grant you, but she was still alive. That's a load of crap, that is. So as the boy's saying that, John is walking over to his chair, and he sits down kind of slowly, easing himself into it, and his narration says, it's Jerry. Of course it is. Then we get another shot of that panel from earlier that was of a hand resting on top of something that was written on the floor, and John's narration continues, I'm hiding here from Jerry. He's a pain junkie. I've met others like that. Heavy-duty masochists drawn to the occult for kicks. Multiple possession. Minor demons scrabbling inside you like a hot wire. I couldn't care one way or another. Whatever turns you on. But why the hell should I get involved? If he'd been honest with me, the exorcism might not have been such a cock-up, but he wasn't. I got the first spirit out easily enough. Only trouble is, there were more of them in there.
60 or 70, according to Jerry. He'd even lost count. So I walked out and left him to it. I'm no sadist. I'm not going to sit around while they run through him, watch them unravel him from the backbone down. He can sort it out himself. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's recovered already. But I don't want to know any more. I've had enough of this crap to last a lifetime. If he wants to play with fire, fine. But he can leave me out of it. So under this narration on the panels, we do see that hand again, but then we zoom out and we see the hand is attached to an arm that's all cut up, and then it's inside of a pentagram circle, and that was the design that the hand was on top of, is one of the points of the pentagram. And then we see in the middle of that pentagram is actually a body that is dead, and that is Jerry. Jerry has died in John's apartment after John walked out. And then John is snapped out of his thoughts by someone saying, "Ow!" And we see it's the mother who is breastfeeding. And then she notices John look at her. She says, "He's got such sharp little teeth." And then we get a close-up shot of the baby who has one little, really sharp snaggletooth. And then out of nowhere, John says under his breath, "You're a 24-karat shithead, Jerry." And then he looks up at the clock and he sees it is now 10 o'clock. And he turns to the old ladies and says, "Well, she's not coming, is she? Come on, face it. Look at the sodding time. I mean, what's she going to do, flag down a hearse? Not a chance." And as he says this, he lights up a cigarette and begins to smoke. And then Phyllis turns to John and says, "Well, we made it, love. If we can do it, I'm sure she can." And as she says this, it seems like John finally kind of understands what's going on. And his narration says, "Keep hold, mate. Don't lose it now. It's a put-up job. You're in a laundrette in the middle of bloody Peckham, for Christ's sake, not Transylvania." And then we see a dog that had been trying to get into the door the whole time, and it finally gets into the laundrette. And it immediately goes over to the old ladies and begins to sniff them furiously. And then John thinks to himself, "You can walk out of here anytime you want. Just open the door and then all of a sudden he hears a crash. And the crash was of a window from the place next door, which was a butcher shop. And it seems like John is trying to fight against what is happening here, which it seems like maybe all the people in this laundrette are dead, but John doesn't really want to accept that. So he stands up and says, "Jesus Christ, what the hell's going on?" And Phyllis answers, "Oh, it's just next door. Don't worry, love. It'll be Florrie. She'll want to make herself look presentable, won't she? 12 floors. She's come a long way." And then we see the dog get more and more aggressive towards one of the old ladies, and its head is under her skirt, kind of between her legs, and it rips something out, and we can't really tell what it is, but it looks like some kind of paper or maybe fabric that it's torn, and the dog is drooling over it, so it looks really gross. And as John sees this, he can't really deny anymore what he's been seeing, and his narration says, "There's a pub across the street, a pub full of people and lights and noise and life. Scores chalked up by the dartboard, old men playing dominoes, Lou Reed on the jukebox. Saw this for a game of soldiers." And he goes to the door and he begins to open it, and he walks outside and he actually goes to the butcher's shop and he looks through the window, and his narration says, "So there's a dead woman in the butcher's shop. So bloody what? You've already made one cock up today, but there's a dead woman in the butcher's shop and you're thinking, what am I going to do for an encore? Well, sod it, not this time." Then a breeze browses past, and Jesus, the smell. Shit and piss and something sweet like aniseed, like coffee that's been left in a flask for weeks. The figure moves, shuffles sideways, and then there's a creak like the creak of new leather shoes, but it isn't wearing shoes. It isn't wearing anything. And you start walking, past the parked cars and the street lamps, and the dogs barking, and there's glass under your feet, and you're walking. Walking, not running. You don't need to run. There's plenty of time. There's an hour before last orders. You've got all the time in the world. So John leaves to go to a pub and try to forget everything that's happened with his friend Jerry and everything that's happened at this laundrette. But then we cut to the inside of the laundrette and we see there is in fact someone standing in the doorway, and we only see the feet, but it is supposed to be Florrie. And one of the old ladies says, "Ah, there she is. Hello, love. We knew you'd make it." And another one says, "Oh, Florrie, what have you done to your hand? I never thought. We could have brought some gloves." And then the other one says, "We remembered the coat, though. It's one of mine, but it should fit all right. It'll do until you get home anyway. Then we'll give that son of yours what for. Come on, love, don't look so worried. We'll soon get you fixed up. A couple of stitches, and you'll be right as rain. We'll have you on your feet in no time." And we see the old ladies kind of gather around her, putting the coat on her, and one of them is getting a needle and sewing thread ready. And then we cut to the outside, and we see that someone is throwing up near an underpass next to the laundrette, and the narration says, "The sodium street lamps turn everything to cinemascope, lean and gritty under a begging bowl sky. In the distance, a dog starts barking and doesn't stop." And we do see on the laundrette there is a for sale sign, so it seems like maybe this laundrette was just an empty building and John went in there and met a bunch of dead people. But that is the end of the issue, so if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at plainstreamsandcomicbooks, all one word, @gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.